Hey everyone, I'm back. Apologies for missing a couple of weeks, but actually for the last two sessions on Wednesday nights, we've been in the same chapter of this unfolding teaching about Lutherans in the Bible, so we're not that far behind. Let me catch you up. The main point from the past 2 weeks is that context matters when it comes to the Bible. This is Mark Allen Powell's How Lutherans Interpret the Bible. And we're to the part about context and reading the Bible for what it says to its original audience, what it says to us. As we've said before, we will privilege any interpretation that leans toward how the original hearers of a text might have interpreted it. Would the original hearers have considered the story to be a folk tale conveying an important lesson? Would they have considered a story or a text to be poetry, or a section of advice or God's law? That sort of thing. Any questions about the biblical context means asking about historical context and literary context. So we've talked about how the Bible is a library of books. Some of them are songs and proverbs. Some of them are stories like parables or miracle stories. There are genealogies, as you know. Those are always fun sections to read. There are historical accounts and law codes and letters and prophetic oracles and legends and folk tales too. All of these kinds of things in our Bible. So it might sound basic, but it's important to ask these questions of passages that we read before we go ahead and assume, oh, this will apply in exactly this instance, or this will apply literally. It's not always that way. There are many examples of this, but here's one from actually this coming Sunday in the lectionary for the gospel this Sunday. In the gospel for July 9th, Jesus will say, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." Now, I'll talk in my sermon about the yoke and how a yoke is used for working animals. But the point for here and now is to say, we don't read this passage thinking at the time that Jesus was yoked up around his neck and was saying, "You see this thing right here around my neck? It's easy and light. You'll get it." No, we see him using a metaphor as he's teaching. He's talking about his way in the world, and he's inviting the followers to that kind of walk together. The idea of carrying things together. So that's a simple metaphorical instance, but we talked in class about many instances where the context matters and context helps us understand and interpret a passage. One classic example is Jonah, the book of Jonah. Now, many folks, when they think of Jonah, they want to debate whether or not a man actually got swallowed by a large fish and actually survived for 3 days in the belly before being vomited back up on the shore. I know these debates, people wondering, is it possible? What kind of fish could this be? Where and when, if it's possible? But if you read the story of Jonah, and it's got to be clear to the audience, when you take it as a story, it isn't about the existence or not of a big fish or that Jonah stayed alive for days and days. Whether or not that happened is nowhere near the point of the story because it just keeps moving. The story is about a God of mercy sending a messenger to go and proclaim, and then asking that messenger to confront in themselves the way that he has harbored anger over mercy. And that's not just like one various interpretation. I mean, that's how the story wraps up. It's like ending in a way to say, and the moral of the story is Jonah. And so here, Mark Allen Powell is suggesting, read the Bible in community and ask each other about the context of stories so that we help each other handle these stories faithfully. And we learn from each other, and we learn from history, and we learn from scholarship. This pertains to all the various stories, creation stories, the poetry of the Bible, the story of the kings and the people, the stories of the life of Jesus and the early followers, and the book of Revelation. The context for the stories gives us clues to be better, more faithful readers. One example of context is Mark Allen Powell said, think of if we were going to make a time capsule about North American life right now and the kinds of books or writings or media that we would put together to put in a capsule that would be found 2,000 or 4,000 years from now. And the kind of assumptions that readers might make about what we were experiencing or what we meant when we wrote or said certain things. Understanding life in 2023 will vastly help readers or hearers in the future understand what we mean when we tell a story or sing a song or use a genre of literature. One takeaway for me from all this learning is that as Lutherans, we're actually okay with various interpretations of various texts. We have a lot of space for the insights that might come from considering a text one way or another. We can have the conversation. We can have the conversation. Is the creation story in Genesis a literal story? Did it happen in 7 days exactly like it says? Or is this poetry ruminating on a God who creates and does things over time? There's space in our denomination for that interesting conversation. And there are some denominations for whom that spaciousness isn't allowed, and that's their interpretation. But I really value where we are. I'm thankful for it. It's why I'm where we are. And I value that we see how good it is to learn from ancient contexts and to discuss it in our context today. So join us and discuss. All right.